In Hollywood, danger often hides behind the brightest lights. These actors stepped onto sets believing they were creating fiction, never knowing that their final moments would blur the line between performance and fate. Tonight, we descend into the shadows of cinema, uncovering the real tragedies that unfolded where cameras rolled and lives were forever changed. Number 1. Heath Ledger. Heath Ledger spent his final months immersed in the role that would define him. The world saw the brilliance, but few understood the exhaustion beneath it. In January 2008, inside his quiet New York apartment, the echoes of long nights and relentless creative pressure finally caught up with him. He lay down, hoping for a moment of rest, unaware that the medications he relied on for sleep would never let him wake again. Paramedics arrived within minutes, yet the stillness in the room told a truth no one wanted to accept. At only 28, Heath's life ended abruptly, sending shockwaves through the global film community. His performance as the Joker, filmed only months earlier, instantly transformed into a haunting legacy, raw, unbounded, and unforgettable. Those close to him spoke of nights where insomnia gnawed at his energy, of days spent balancing dedication with quiet frustration. The investigation revealed it as an accidental overdose, a tragic convergence of fatigue and medication. There were no signs of despair, only the weight of a mind that refused to shut down. When The Dark Knight premiered, audiences watched with awe, unaware they were witnessing a farewell. His Oscar, awarded after his passing, felt both triumphant and devastating, a testament to a talent extinguished far too early. Heath Ledger's story became a turning point, forcing Hollywood to confront the hidden toll of artistic intensity, the fragile line between creation and collapse. His legacy, carved from brilliance and burden, endures in every frame he left behind, an eternal reminder of how even the brightest flames can burn too hot to last. Number 2. Brandon Lee. Brandon Lee stepped onto the set of The Crow in 1993, believing it would be the film that finally proved he belonged not just as Bruce Lee's son, but as a star in his own right. The warehouse set in Wilmington felt like countless others he had worked on before. Dim lights, rehearsed movements, and a prop gun prepared carefully by the crew. Nothing suggested danger. Nothing hinted at the single hidden flaw waiting inside the barrel. When the director called action, the flash was brighter than expected, the sound sharper than it should have been. Brandon collapsed. At first, everyone believed it was part of the scene. But the silence that followed revealed the truth. A fragment from a dummy round, unnoticed from a previous setup, had transformed the blank cartridge into a real bullet. One overlooked detail, one missed check, and everything shattered. He was rushed to the hospital, where surgeons fought desperately for hours. But at just 28 years old, Brandon was gone. In a cruel echo of his father's fate, a rising legend was taken before the world could witness his full potential. Those who worked beside him remembered his discipline, his kindness, and the quiet determination that set him apart. He trained tirelessly, handled his own stunts, and carried the burden of a legacy with remarkable grace. Production halted immediately. Some questioned whether the film should be completed at all. Months later, The Crow was finished using body doubles and early digital effects, turning the final cut into something far more than a movie. It became a memorial, a final offering from an actor whose career had only begun to bloom. Brandon Lee's death forced Hollywood to confront the complacency surrounding prop weapons. New rules, stricter protocols, and constant oversight emerged in the aftermath. His story became a lesson written in blood, a reminder that even one small shortcut can echo through generations. And yet, beyond tragedy, Brandon remains a symbol of promise, intensity, and vulnerability. Every frame he left behind carries the weight of a future stolen too soon. Number 3. Paul Walker. Paul Walker never planned to stay long at the charity event that November afternoon in 2013. He had greeted fans, signed autographs, and shared his usual easy smile. The same warmth that made millions around the world love him long before Fast and Furious turned him into an icon. When he stepped into the red Porsche Carrera GT for a short drive with his friend Roger Rodas, no one imagined it would be his final ride. Moments later, the sound of screeching tires tore through the quiet streets of Santa Clarita. The car, built for speed but unforgiving to the slightest miscalculation, lost control on a sweeping curve. It struck a lamppost with devastating force, and within seconds, flames engulfed the wreckage. Witnesses rushed forward, but the heat was too intense. By the time emergency crews arrived, the fire had already sealed the fate of both men. Paul was only 40, right in the middle of filming Furious 7, a project that had brought him closer than ever to the franchise's global family. His sudden passing froze Hollywood in disbelief. Colleagues described him as humble, generous, and deeply loyal, the kind of actor who avoided red carpets whenever possible but would drive across the city to help a friend in need. Away from the screen, he dedicated himself to reach out worldwide, personally traveling to disaster zones long before the cameras arrived. After the tragedy, production halted as the cast mourned. Universal eventually completed the film using Paul's brothers as stand-ins and advanced digital doubles. When the final scene, Brian's farewell drive into the sunset, played in theaters, audiences around the world felt the weight of what had been lost. It wasn't just a character disappearing from the franchise, it was the goodbye of a man whose spirit had defined it. His death prompted renewed conversations about high-performance vehicles and the culture of speed surrounding Hollywood action stars. But beyond the lessons, Paul Walker's legacy rests in something simpler: kindness, sincerity, and a quiet strength that made him beloved long before fame found him. His story remains a reminder that even the fastest lives can leave the deepest impact once the engine goes silent. Number 4. Steve Irwin. Steve Irwin had spent his entire life defying danger with a smile. To millions, he was the unstoppable crocodile hunter, a man whose enthusiasm made the wild feel welcoming and whose courage seemed limitless. But on a calm September day in 2006, while filming an underwater documentary off the coast of Queensland, even his experience could not predict what fate would bring. The ocean was clear, the weather calm, and the shoot was simple: capture close-up footage of marine life in the shallow reef. Steve had done this thousands of times. He moved through the water with practiced ease, surrounded by a crew that trusted his instincts more than any manual or safety guide. As he approached a large stingray resting on the seabed, no one sensed danger. Stingrays are rarely aggressive. This was supposed to be routine. But in an instant, the animal reacted to the shadow of the camera and lashed upward. Its tail struck with the speed of pure instinct. The barb pierced Steve's chest. The crew pulled him to the boat within seconds, desperately performing CPR as they raced back to shore, but the injury was too severe. By the time medical teams arrived, Steve Irwin, a global symbol of life, energy, and love for nature, was gone at just 44 years old. The world's reaction was immediate and overwhelming. News outlets across continents paused regular programming. Fans left flowers at zoos. Children who had grown up listening to his excited voice cried openly. Steve had been more than a television personality. He was a teacher who transformed fear into curiosity and showed viewers the beauty hidden inside every creature, even the misunderstood and dangerous ones. He came from a family of wildlife caretakers and spent his childhood rescuing reptiles, learning to move with the rhythm of the natural world. His TV series turned him into a superstar, but he remained unchanged. Humble, exuberant, and fiercely devoted to conservation. He believed education could save endangered species, and he fought relentlessly for that mission. After his passing, his wife Terry and their children, Bindi and Robert, vowed to carry his legacy forward. The Australia Zoo expanded its conservation projects. Documentaries were released in his honor. Governments, scientists, and millions of fans paid tribute to the man who made the world fall in love with animals. Steve Irwin's death reshaped safety approaches for wildlife filmmaking, reminding crews that even the gentlest environments can become unpredictable. But more importantly, his life became a symbol of purpose, a reminder that passion, when shared with love and sincerity, can change the world. His legacy still moves like a heartbeat through every conservation effort he inspired, living on in the wild creatures he spent his life protecting. Number 5. Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee spent his final day in July 1973 discussing the future, new scenes for Game of Death, new ideas, new horizons he was ready to conquer. At 32 years old, he had already changed cinema forever. His speed, his philosophy, his presence on screen had transformed him into a global icon. To fans around the world, he seemed invincible. Yet inside a small apartment in Hong Kong, fate unfolded in a way no one could have imagined. That afternoon, Bruce complained of a sharp headache during a meeting with producer Raymond Chow. It wasn't unusual. The weeks leading up to the moment had been relentless, filled with training, choreography, rewrites, and preparation for upcoming releases. He decided to lie down and rest, stepping into a quiet room to escape the pressure just for a moment. When his associates returned hours later, they found him unresponsive. Despite immediate medical attention, Bruce Lee was pronounced gone that evening. The cause was traced to a reaction to a common pain medication, a simple tablet taken to ease discomfort. It made no sense to anyone who knew him. Bruce had treated his body like a precision instrument his entire life, training with a discipline that bordered on spiritual. Yet one ordinary act became the moment that silenced a legend. The world refused to believe it. News spread within hours across Asia, then the United States, then the rest of the world. Shock turned into disbelief, disbelief into grief. Only weeks earlier, Bruce had completed Enter the Dragon, the film that would become his legacy and define the martial arts genre for generations. Its release after his passing felt like both a triumph and a wound. Proof of his brilliance and a reminder of everything he still had yet to give. Bruce Lee was more than an action star. He was a thinker, a philosopher, and innovator who blended physical mastery with deep introspection. He challenged stereotypes, broke cultural barriers, and inspired millions to see strength not as domination but as self-discovery. His influence touched martial artists, actors, directors, athletes, and ordinary people seeking discipline and purpose. After his death, conversations began about the pressure placed on physical performers, the extreme demands of action cinema, and the thin line between dedication and self-sacrifice. Hollywood slowly recognized that pushing the human body to its limits carried real, often overlooked risks. Bruce's passing became a reminder that even those who appear the strongest can be vulnerable to the smallest fractures in fate. His name endures like a myth, powerful, timeless, and impossible to forget. In every punch thrown on screen, in every actor inspired to break boundaries, in every philosophy student who finds meaning in his words, Bruce Lee's spirit continues to move the world. A flame extinguished too early but bright enough to light generations. Number 6. John Ritter. John Ritter brought laughter into millions of homes. the kind of warm, effortless humor that made people feel lighter just by seeing his smile. On September 11, 2003, he arrived on the set of 8 Simple Rules for Dating My Teenage Daughter, expecting an ordinary day. The cast rehearsed scenes, adjusted lighting, and shared stories between takes. Everything felt normal, until suddenly, it wasn't. Not long after a run-through, John began to feel an intense discomfort in his chest. At first, those around him assumed it was exhaustion from the long studio hours or the heat from the stage lights. But within moments, he collapsed. Panic swept through the crew. Paramedics from the hospital across the street arrived within minutes and rushed him to emergency care. Doctors worked urgently, testing, scanning, searching for answers. The diagnosis came too late. An aortic dissection, a rare and catastrophic tear in the heart's main artery. By that evening, John Ritter was gone, just one day before his 55th birthday. Hollywood froze. Fans who had grown up with Three's Company felt as though they had lost a friend. Colleagues who knew him personally spoke of a man who was gentle, generous, and endlessly kind. His co-stars from every era of his career described the same thing. He was the beating heart of every set, the person who made the room brighter just by stepping inside. John had built a career on sincerity. His comedic timing was legendary, but what truly set him apart was his humanity, the vulnerability he brought to his characters, the warmth that made audiences adore him. Awards, acclaim, and fame meant little compared to the joy he felt simply making people laugh. Production halted completely. When the show eventually returned, the writers dedicated an emotional tribute episode to him, a farewell that brought millions of viewers to tears. His passing sparked national conversations about aortic dissection, a condition few people even knew existed. New medical protocols were created. Awareness campaigns were launched. His family founded an organization in his name to prevent others from losing loved ones the same way. John Ritter's final day reminded the world how fragile life can be, even for those who seem full of endless energy. His laughter still echoes through the decades, living on in reruns, in memories, and in the hearts of those who felt they grew up with him. A gentle soul, taken without warning, leaving behind a legacy of smiles. Number 7. Paul Mantz. Paul Mantz had spent decades dancing with the sky. To Hollywood, he was the man who could make airplanes move like poetry. A pilot who turned danger into a craft so precise that even directors trusted him more than special effects. By 1965, he had built a reputation few could match, flying in classics that defined entire eras of aerial cinema. When he joined the production of The Flight of the Phoenix, it felt like another challenge he would master with the calm confidence that had carried him through a lifetime above the clouds. The desert heat shimmered around the crew on that July afternoon. Cameras were set, angles rehearsed, and Paul climbed into the cockpit of his specially modified P-1 Mustang. The scene required a dramatic belly landing across uneven terrain, a maneuver that demanded absolute precision. But if anyone could pull it off, it was him. The plane touched down exactly where the director envisioned. For a split second, everything looked perfect, until it wasn't. The aircraft's nose struck a hidden dip in the sand. In an instant, the plane snapped forward, flipping violently in a cloud of dust and metal. Crew members sprinted toward the wreckage, shouting his name over the roar of the wind. But the impact had already claimed him. Paul Mantz, the man who had mastered the unforgiving sky, was gone at 62. Hollywood mourned a legend. Paul was not just a pilot. He was a pioneer who had logged more than 25,000 flight hours and shaped the language of aerial filmmaking. He had flown through storms, skimmed mountaintops, and executed stunts directors once believed impossible. He embodied both daring ambition and disciplined skill, a rare balance that made his death feel almost unthinkable. The investigation revealed that the aircraft was heavier than planned, carrying extra fuel that altered its balance during the low maneuver. It was a simple miscalculation with irreversible consequences. Hollywood took notice. New procedures were introduced, demanding more rigorous testing and stricter safety margins for any aerial stunt. Paul's death became a turning point, a reminder that even the most experienced can fall victim to the smallest oversight. The Flight of the Phoenix was released later that year with a dedication to his memory. The scenes he filmed before the crash remained untouched, a final testament to his mastery of the craft. For audiences, his work became a silent tribute to the risks taken behind every thrilling moment on screen. Paul Mance's story is still carried on the desert wind, a reminder that even legends must surrender to fate when the sky decides otherwise. Number 8. Art Scholl. Art Scholl lived in the sky the way most people live on the ground, effortlessly, naturally, as if the air itself welcomed him. For decades, he had been Hollywood's most trusted stunt pilot, the man studios called when they needed impossible shots, dizzying spins, or breathtaking aerial sequences no camera crew could capture from the ground. His work appeared in documentaries, commercials, and films that defined generations. But in September 1985, while filming footage for Top Gun, the sky he loved so deeply became the place where fate struck without warning. The request that day was bold but familiar, a complex spin maneuver over the Pacific Ocean, designed to mimic the ferocity of aerial combat. Art prepared with the same precision he applied to every flight. He climbed into his modified Pitts S2 biplane, outfitted with custom camera mounts that allowed him to film while performing the stunt. For most pilots, this would have been overwhelming. For Art Scholl, it was simply another dance with gravity. As the cameras rolled, he lifted into the clear California sky, the plane slicing through the air with its signature agility. He began the spin, smooth at first, then accelerating into the tight downward spiral the director needed. But then, everything shifted. Witnesses on the ground saw the plane tip too sharply, the spiral tightening beyond recovery. Over the radio, Art's voice came through, calm but urgent. "I have a problem. I can't recover." Those were his final words. Seconds later, the aircraft vanished into the ocean. Search teams combed the waters for days, but neither the wreckage nor Art's body was ever found. It was as if the sea itself had swallowed the legend whole. Hollywood fell silent. Art wasn't just a stunt pilot. He was a visionary of aerial cinematography. He had flown for The Right Stuff, Iron Eagle, Blue Thunder, and dozens of productions that relied on his fearlessness and precision. Fellow pilots considered him unmatched. Directors praised his instincts. Students he taught spoke of him as a mentor with boundless patience and an endless passion for the craft. Investigators later concluded that the added weight of the camera equipment may have altered the plane's balance, making recovery from the spin impossible. The tragedy reshaped industry protocols, forcing productions to reassess how equipment loads affect aircraft performance and to implement stricter safety tests before any aerial stunt could be approved. Though his final footage was never recovered, the legacy of Art Scholl remained in every sweeping sky shot that followed. Top Gun was released with a dedication to him, a simple, powerful acknowledgement of the man who risked everything to capture Hollywood's dreams from above. Art Scholl's story endures, not just in film history, but in every pilot who dares to chase the perfect shot, knowing that the sky is as beautiful as it is unforgiving. Number 9. John Eric Hexum. John Eric Hexum was the kind of rising star Hollywood notices instantly. Tall, charismatic, effortlessly charming, with a presence that made cameras feel drawn to him. At just 26, he was already carving out a path toward leading man fame. On the set of the television series Cover Up in October 1984, he walked through another long shooting day with the same easy confidence, joking with the crew as they prepared for the next scene. No one imagined the tragedy that would unfold in a single, careless moment. During a delay between takes, the cast waited while lighting adjustments were made. The minutes stretched on, the atmosphere grew restless, and John's playful humor bubbled up like always. Sitting near a prop revolver loaded with blanks for an upcoming scene, he picked it up, not out of recklessness, but out of boredom. Trying to make the crew laugh, he spun the chamber, placed the barrel against his temple, and pulled the trigger. Blanks contain no bullet, but the explosive force that propels a round is still real. At point-blank range, that force becomes deadly. The blast sent a shockwave through his skull, and John immediately collapsed. Panic erupted. Crew members called for help, shouting for paramedics, who arrived within minutes. He was rushed into surgery, doctors fighting through the night to relieve the swelling in his brain. For 6 days he lay in the hospital, surrounded by family and colleagues who refused to let go of hope. But the injury was too severe. John Eric Hexum passed away on October 18, 1984, leaving behind a career that had barely begun and a world of fans who had only just discovered him. His co-stars remembered a man full of light, funny, generous, and endlessly kind. He had starred in Voyagers and was poised to break into mainstream stardom with Cover Up. Casting directors saw in him a future action hero. Fans adored him for the spark in his eyes and the sincerity beneath his broad grin. And yet, in the quiet aftermath of his death, Hollywood realized something it had ignored for too long. Blanks are not harmless. The investigation confirmed what experts already knew, but many productions had forgotten. The gas pressure and debris expelled by blank cartridges can be lethal at close range. New safety rules erupted across the industry. Actors were banned from pointing any firearm prop at themselves or others, even when supposedly unloaded. Armorers gained more authority on set, and handling protocols became stricter than ever. John Eric Hexum's story became a tragic lesson taught in every safety briefing, every rehearsal involving weapons, every set where someone holds a gun, real or not. His name became a warning carved into Hollywood's memory. But beyond the cautionary tale, he remains the young man with unlimited potential, a life rising high, cut short in a split second of innocence and misjudgment. A reminder that even the smallest act can carry unimaginable consequences. Number 10. Vic Morrow. Vic Morrow had spent decades building a reputation as one of Hollywood's most intense and committed performers. Audiences admired him for the grit he brought to every role, directors trusted his discipline, and colleagues respected his quiet professionalism. By July 1982, he was deep into filming Twilight Zone: The Movie, a highly ambitious production blending fantasy, darkness, and elaborate special effects. But in the early hours of a warm Los Angeles night, a scene meant to portray the chaos of war turned into one of the most devastating tragedies in film history. The setup was massive: explosions, smoke, and a low-flying helicopter choreographed to simulate a rescue amid battle. Vic stood waist-deep in a shallow river, holding 2 child actors tightly as pyrotechnics ignited around them. It was loud, chaotic, exactly as the director envisioned. But beneath the spectacle, danger was quietly multiplying. The explosions were set too close to the hovering helicopter. Each blast sent up gusts of fire and pressure, destabilizing the aircraft just feet above the actors' heads. Crew members later recalled hearing the pilot struggle as the rotor blades began to lose balance. Then came the moment no one could stop. A fireball erupted too near the aircraft. The helicopter pitched violently, clipped its tail rotor, and spiraled downward in a matter of seconds. The noise drowned out the screams. The aircraft crashed into the riverbank with catastrophic force. When the smoke cleared, the set fell into stunned silence. There was no second take, no chance to intervene. Vic Morrow and the 2 children he had been holding were gone instantly. The aftermath engulfed Hollywood in shock and controversy. Investigators uncovered a disturbing chain of negligence. The helicopter flying lower than approved. Pyrotechnics detonated closer than safety protocols allowed. Warnings from crew members ignored. The tragedy triggered one of the most significant legal battles in film history, raising painful questions about whether ambition had overridden caution. Vic Morrow, at 53, had been enjoying a resurgence in his career. Audiences knew him from Combat, a series where he portrayed the cost of war with raw intensity. It was a cruel twist of fate that a simulated battle scene took his life. Friends described him as a consummate professional, a man devoted to his craft and deeply protective of the people he worked with, which made the circumstances of his death even more harrowing. Hollywood changed because of him. New safety regulations were enforced. Stunt coordinators gained stronger authority. Limits on explosives, flight paths, and child labor laws became far stricter. Every major studio felt the ripple of that night, and every large-scale action shoot carried the memory of what reckless oversight could cost. Vic Morrow's legacy now stands not only in his performances, but in the safeguards his death forced the industry to adopt. A man who spent his career portraying survival in chaos became the catalyst for making real film sets safer for generations to come. Number 11. Martha Mansfield. Martha Mansfield was one of Hollywood's earliest rising stars, a young actress whose grace, expressive eyes, and quiet intensity set her apart in the silent film era. In November 1923, on the set of The Warrens of Virginia in San Antonio, Texas, she stepped outside between scenes, unaware that history was about to claim her in one of cinema's first on-set tragedies. The cast had just finished filming an outdoor Civil War sequence. Martha, dressed in a flowing period costume made of delicate lace and fabric, walked toward a waiting car to rest. Inside, someone struck a match to light a cigarette, a small, simple gesture no one paid attention to. A stray ember drifted through the air and touched the hem of her dress. The fire ignited instantly. Flammable chemicals used to stiffen the costume fed the flames, turning the elegant garment into a fuse that roared upward in seconds. Witnesses later said the dress seemed to vanish into fire. Her co-star Wilfred Littell threw his coat around her desperately. Another crew member grabbed a blanket, but the blaze moved too fast. By the time they smothered the flames, Martha had suffered catastrophic burns. She was rushed to a nearby hospital. Doctors worked through the night, but the injuries were too severe. At only 24 years old, one of Hollywood's brightest new talents slipped away the next day. The news stunned the industry. Martha had been considered a future leading lady, praised for her performance months earlier alongside John Barrymore in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Critics admired her emotional depth. Casting directors saw enormous promise. Fans loved her gentle screen presence, believing she was destined for stardom. Her death exposed a harsh truth about early filmmaking. Costumes were often treated with highly flammable chemicals. Sets relied on open flames for lighting. Safety regulations were nearly non-existent. The tragedy forced studios to reconsider their methods, leading to early rules requiring flame-retardant materials and safer lighting practices, small steps that would grow into the modern safety standards used today. When The Warrens of Virginia was released, audiences watched with heavy hearts, knowing the terrible fate that followed those scenes. Silent film magazines published tributes describing her as a lost promise, a talent taken before she could fully bloom. Martha Mansfield's story remains one of Hollywood's earliest reminders that behind the beauty and innocence of cinema's golden beginnings lay real risk, and that even the brightest young star could be extinguished by a moment's accident. Number 12. Kate Lester. Kate Lester had spent a lifetime on the stage before becoming a familiar face in silent films, a dignified actress known for playing elegant mothers, noble women, and characters whose presence anchored entire scenes. By October 1924, she was deep into another production at Universal Studios, preparing for an afternoon of shooting in her small dressing room. For a woman with decades of experience, it was just another day in Hollywood's young, chaotic industry, until a quiet moment turned deadly. The studio corridors were filled with the sharp smell of paint and chemicals, common at the time when safety standards were minimal and ventilation nearly non-existent. In Kate's dressing room, a gas heater warmed the space as she reviewed her script. The combination of fumes, open flames, and flammable materials created a hazard that no one recognized. Then, without warning, the heater malfunctioned. A spark ignited the gas that had been gathering unnoticed. The explosion was sudden, violent, and powerful enough to blow the door open and send smoke billowing into the hallway. Studio workers dropped everything and ran toward the blast. They broke through the warped doorway and pulled Kate from the flames, her body severely burned but still clinging to life. She was rushed to Hollywood Hospital. Doctors fought through the night, but the injuries were far too extensive. Kate Lester passed away before dawn. She was 53. Hollywood mourned quietly but deeply. Kate had been a respected presence, appearing alongside stars like John Gilbert and Lon Chaney. Colleagues described her as gentle, disciplined, and refined, a woman who approached each role with humility and grace. Her death struck the industry hard, not just because she was beloved, but because it revealed how dangerously unregulated studio environments truly were. Investigators found that a faulty connection in the heater had caused the blast. But the deeper issue was clear. Gas lines were poorly maintained, sets were built from wood and canvas drenched in flammable chemicals, and fire safety was barely considered. The tragedy pushed studios to reevaluate heating systems, ventilation, and emergency procedures, particularly in dressing rooms where actors spent long hours surrounded by hazardous materials. Silent film magazines published tributes praising her decades-long career, calling her one of the industry's quiet pillars. Her passing marked one of Hollywood's earliest recorded explosions linked directly to studio negligence. Kate Lester's story remains a solemn reminder of the dangers hidden behind the glamour of early filmmaking, a time when ambition outpaced safety, and when stars worked in spaces far more perilous than audiences ever imagined. Number 13. Roy Kinnear. Roy Kinnear was the kind of actor whose presence made every scene richer. Audiences adored him for his humor, his warmth, and his unmistakable charm, a performer who could turn even a small supporting role into something unforgettable. By 1988, he had become one of Britain's most beloved character actors, appearing in classics like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory and Help. So when he joined the cast of The Return of the Musketeers, it felt like a joyful reunion with director Richard Lester and longtime colleagues. No one expected the production to become the site of heartbreak. The film was shooting on location in Madrid. The day's scene called for frantic horseback riding through narrow cobblestone streets, a sequence meant to bring adventure and humor to the screen. Roy wasn't a stunt performer, but the action was considered manageable. The roads were slick from a light drizzle earlier in the afternoon, but the crew decided to continue. Cameras rolled. The horses charged forward. Then it happened. Roy's horse slipped on the uneven stones. He was thrown violently from the saddle, crashing onto the hard pavement. Crew members ran to him immediately. He was conscious but in excruciating pain. Within minutes, he was rushed to a nearby hospital in Madrid, where surgeons discovered severe internal injuries. Despite emergency surgery, Roy Kinnear passed away the following day at 54. The cast was devastated. Richard Lester, who had directed Roy in multiple films, was shattered beyond words. Colleagues described the atmosphere on set as hollow, as if the film had lost its heart. Lester later said the tragedy affected him so deeply that he never directed another feature film again. Roy had always been more than a comic actor. His generosity on set was legendary. He brought kindness to every rehearsal, laughter to every gloomy morning, and support to younger performers finding their footing. Friends remembered him as someone who never took himself too seriously, but took his craft very seriously. His performances were filled with sincerity, even in the silliest moments. The accident exposed serious gaps in safety procedures for foreign shoots. Medical readiness was minimal, stunt coordination inconsistent, and the conditions of the street had been deemed safe too quickly. In the aftermath, European studios tightened their safety rules, requiring better on-site medical teams, clearer communication between directors and stunt coordinators, and stricter evaluation of shooting conditions. When The Return of the Musketeers was released, it was dedicated to Roy's memory. Fans who watched his final performance felt both delight and sorrow. Delight in the brilliance he brought to the screen, and sorrow in knowing what the production ultimately cost. Roy Kinnear's story underscores a painful truth. Tragedy on set doesn't always come from explosions, fire, or spectacular stunts. Sometimes it comes from one slip, one fall, one moment of misjudged risk. And it leaves behind an emptiness no film can ever truly fill. Number 14. Brandon DeWilde. Brandon DeWilde had a kind of talent that appeared once in a generation, pure, unforced, and disarmingly honest. As a child actor, he captured the world's heart with a single line in Shane. "Come back, Shane." That small voice carried such emotion that it earned him an Academy Award nomination at just 11 years old. For the rest of his life, audiences expected greatness from him, and he delivered. But in July 1972, on a quiet highway outside Denver, destiny ended his story long before it should have. That evening, Brandon was driving home after rehearsing for a stage production he had recently joined. The night was dark, the air thin, and visibility low across the open Colorado road. He guided his camper van along the familiar route, likely thinking of lines he needed to refine, of performances he hoped to perfect. Ahead, another vehicle began turning across his lane, too late, too sudden to avoid. The collision was violent. His van spun across the asphalt before rolling onto its side. Emergency responders arrived within minutes and rushed him to the hospital, but the injuries were catastrophic. Brandon DeWilde died shortly after arrival. He was only 30 years old. Hollywood mourned in stunned silence. Brandon had transitioned seamlessly from child stardom to deeply layered adult roles, something few actors ever manage. In films like HUD and All Fall Down, he proved he could stand shoulder to shoulder with legends like Paul Newman and Melvin Douglas. Directors said he had a rare emotional instinct, a sensitivity that made every scene feel alive. Yet despite his fame, he preferred quiet nights, music, and books to Hollywood glamour. Friends described him as thoughtful and gentle, a man who carried his childhood humility into adulthood. He remained grounded, perhaps even shy, refusing to let early fame distort who he was. His career was beginning to evolve again through theater, a place where he felt closest to storytelling's raw pulse. His performance in Butterflies Are Free had earned strong praise, and he was preparing for more stage roles that would refine him even further. His death felt especially cruel because it occurred just as he was redefining his artistic identity. The industry lost a performer who had already proven his brilliance and still had decades of potential ahead. Brandon DeWilde's name endures as a symbol of quiet greatness, A life that rose early, shone brightly, and fell suddenly on a dark stretch of road. His short journey remains a reminder that even the most extraordinary talents can be swept away in an instant, leaving behind only the beauty of what they created. Number 15. Sarah Jones. Sarah Jones was not a household name, but within the film industry, she was the kind of talent everyone trusted. At just 27 years old, she had become a rising star behind the camera, a hard-working assistant camera operator whose dedication, precision, and quiet strength earned her deep respect on every set she worked on. To her colleagues, she was the future of cinematography. But on February 20, 2014, during the filming of Midnight Rider in Georgia, a moment of negligence turned her promise into tragedy. The crew had gathered on a live railroad trestle to film a dream sequence meant to look surreal and haunting. They were told the tracks were safe, that no trains would come. But the tension in the air felt wrong. The trestle was narrow, offering almost no room to escape. The river below roared far beneath them. Equipment surrounded the crew with nowhere to go. Then, in the distance, they felt the vibration. A train. It came fast, far faster than anyone expected. Panic erupted. Crew members scrambled, trying to clear equipment and themselves from the tracks. There was almost no time. In the chaos, a hospital bed being used as a prop was struck, sending debris flying like shrapnel. Sarah was hit. The impact threw her from the trestle and onto the tracks. Emergency crews rushed to the scene, but the injuries were fatal. She died before she could reach the hospital. Hollywood fell into shock. Sarah Jones was young, talented, beloved, and her death was avoidable. The investigation revealed the truth. The production did not have permission to film on the tracks. They had gambled with safety, with lives, and Sarah paid the price for a decision she never agreed to. The outpouring of grief was immediate. Candlelight vigils appeared in cities across the country. Crews on other productions wore black ribbons for her. Thousands of film workers rallied behind the movement Safety for Sarah, demanding reforms that would ensure no one else on set would face the danger she did that day. At the Academy Awards that year, her photo appeared during the In Memoriam tribute, a moment that carried the weight of the entire industry's guilt and sorrow. Sarah Jones's legacy echoes in every film set, where safety meetings are now mandatory, where crew members refuse unsafe conditions, where producers understand that no shot, no matter how cinematic, is worth a human life. Her story is a reminder that tragedies in Hollywood don't only claim the stars in front of the camera, but also the brilliant, unseen artists behind it, those who give their lives to help others shine. If this story moved you, leave a comment, share the video, and subscribe for more shadows beneath Hollywood's brightest lights.